I was sitting in my living room, a cup of coffee in hand, as the evening news played quietly on the television. It was a Thursday, like any other, cold outside but warm inside my apartment. I had nothing pressing on my schedule, so I let the channels auto-scroll through the standard lineup while I checked emails on my laptop. When the remote paused on Channel 7, the screen flickered briefly before settling. News anchors spoke in their usual measured tone, but behind their familiar faces, a soft static hummed, barely audible at first. I glanced around, wondering if the source was something in the room. My colleague once joked that static was the mind's feedback in television form, but I never gave it much thought. Curious, I lowered the volume on the television, but the static remained, distinct and more pronounced now. It wasn't part of the regular sound mix. It seemed to live beneath the broadcast, as if the channel itself was breathing quietly. I adjusted the antenna, expecting interference from the weather, since storms had been forecast, but the static held steady. I found myself staring, not just at the screen, but at the sound itself. The static seemed to pulse, faintly rising and falling in rhythm with nothing I could detect. I frowned and reached for my phone to Google if others had reported issues with Channel 7's signal. There was no mention. Just a few forums discussing regular television glitches, unrelated to static noise. My colleague joined later in the evening, dropping his coat by the door. He noticed me watching the screen with narrowed eyes, brow furrowed. "What's got you so focused?" he asked. "Channel 7, I said. "There's this static noise under the broadcast. It's weird. Not like usual interference." He shrugged and sat down. "Let me hear." I turned the volume back up, and we both listened. The static was there, a low, steady hum. Then, almost imperceptibly, it seemed to rise when I thought about it. Just a tiny increase in volume. I blinked, wondering if it was my mind playing tricks. "Did you just turn it up?" my colleague asked. "No, I swear it got louder." We tested it, each of us thinking about the noise and quieting ourselves in turn. When I focused on it, the static thickened. When I tried not to hear it, the humming softened. I felt uneasy but also compelled. This was no ordinary static. We exchanged puzzled looks. The technician from my building maintenance came by the next day to check the wiring. My colleague had called him after we tried our experiment again with similar results. The technician was friendly, professional, and carried a small toolkit. He inspected the coaxial cables, the router, the television connectors. Everything was functioning normally. No faults, no signal degradation. He watched the screen quietly for a moment. "I don't see anything unusual," he said finally. "But if you want, I can bring a different set and test the line from downstairs." I accepted. Soon the technician returned with a new television. The static was present there too, exactly as before. He played with the settings, tried different input sources, but it didn't change. "It does sound odd," he admitted, "but nothing on my meters shows interference." I was beginning to feel trapped between reason and something else. The static felt alive, like it waited for me to notice. Strange patterns emerged. I could almost determine its pulse to my heartbeat, though that made no sense. My colleague and I tried recording it, playing it back, slowing it down, but consistently, the noise shifted when I gave it my attention. It was impossible to capture in a pure form. Then the static began to change in a more unsettling way. One evening, as I sat alone, it momentarily grew loud enough to make me flinch. Not just louder, but as though the noise held a shape, an edge forming against the static's white noise. I tried to follow it, focusing intently on that fleeting structure. A voice came through, not clearly spoken, more like syllables half-formed at the edges of comprehension. It was indecipherable, but unmistakably human. I jerked back, expecting something to be wrong with the television, but no other channel showed this effect. I switched off the set, took a deep breath, and told myself it was a trick of sound waves, perhaps interference, or an auditory illusion born from tiredness. But quietly, deep in the back of my mind, I knew whatever was behind the static was something else. Each night, the voice grew steadier within the static's hum, proto-words slipping through, sometimes whispering my name, or fragments of sentences that made no sense, but demanded attention. I tried recording audio again, but the playback only featured static, never the seductive voice. My colleague insisted I take a break from the television. He said the static and voice could be getting to my head. Still, I kept watching, convinced I could unravel what it meant. One night, I sat awake, eyes fixed on the dim glow of the screen. The static swelled and receded rhythmically, and the voice finally shaped itself into a sentence. "Look deeper." I leaned forward, and the static took on new textures, not just noise, but subtle images within the patterns on the screen's flickering light. Faces, places, moments from my past flashed briefly. I squinted, breath held, but when I blinked, they vanished. The technician returned one last time, concerned about the reports. He tried one final test, disconnecting the incoming cable to the television entirely, leaving it only on internal settings. The static vanished instantly. The screen went dark except for the familiar "no signal" message. The voice was gone too. I sat back, relief washing over me. The world returned to normal. But when I switched the television back on, the static came roaring, louder than before, and the voice whispered again, "Do not look away." I switched it off quickly. The apartment felt colder, or maybe it was just quiet without the hum. The next morning, the static had disappeared entirely. The channel broadcast the usual news without fault. The voice was nowhere. I have not switched back since. Sometimes in the silence of the room, I think I can hear the quietest whisper just beyond hearing. The technician told me that sometimes signals carry bits of noise that reflect the past or the environment, but it was meaningless. Maybe he was right. Or maybe the noise was waiting for me to listen again. I keep the television unplugged now. Yet, I cannot remember when I last saw it truly turn off.